In today's video I'll be making a stargazing chair for an old army buddy. He's asked me to make this for a gift for his mum, as she loves sitting on an evening looking up at the stars. The timber that I'm using for this build is 9 inches by 2 inches. Now I wouldn't recommend using timber this thick for this project, as it's incredibly difficult to cut out with a jigsaw. So I'd probably say 1.5 inches would be just about the right size, thick enough and strong enough to hold the weight of a person, but still manageable to cut any type of pattern that you want into the timber and to cut out the tenon. So the first thing I do is I cut one of the lengths to 90 centimeters and I cut the second length to 120 centimeters. I do this at the miter saw, and the 90 centimeter piece is for the seat and the large tenon, and the 120 centimeter piece is for the backrest and the mortise. So here you can see me marking out for the tenon and the seat, and I measure in 10 inches for the seat, and then I mark out 2 inches in from the edges of the board, and then this is the dimensions for the tenon, and then we can cut these out with the jigsaw. I clamp the weight piece down to the surface of the workbench just to make the cut a little steadier and easier to control, and then I cut through the length of the tenon with the jigsaw, and as you can see the jigsaw blade is smoking quite a bit here because the blade was incredibly dull and I couldn't get out because of the current situation to get a new one. When I get down to the pencil mark where the seat begins, I stop cutting and then I cut across the grain, and this forms the first side of the tenon. I then rinse and repeat on the opposite side, and then that's the tenon fully formed and the seat formed. Next I mark out the mortise, and I measure in 10 inches and then square these lines off. I then use the tenon itself to mark out the width of the mortise, and then again square these off, and then lay the tenon directly onto the weight piece and mark off again. I can then add 2mm to the dimensions of the mortise, so there's plenty of room for the tenon to slide in and out without sticking. I then drill 4 pilot holes, one in each corner of the mortise, so I can cut this out with a jigsaw. If you're enjoying the video, guys, please feel free to like, comment, and definitely hit that subscribe button. I always engage with everybody who makes a comment or gives me any feedback. It's really appreciated. So the next thing I do then is, once I've cleared the mortise out, is test fit the tenon, and it fit lovely first time, so I didn't need to do any chiseling, which was great. I then test the chair for comfiness. Next I start marking out for the design what we're going to put on the backrest of the chair. So first thing I do is find the centre of the timber that we're using, and then I knock in 2 pins, and then I can use my flexible ruler to mark out a nice curvature on the board, because I thought this would make it feel more feminine. I then use a can of briar wax to mark out the oval shape on the top. I then use the power of the belly and the flexible ruler again to mark out that shape. You'll notice here that I'm using my small Titan bandsaw to cut out the curvature on the design that we've chosen. However, I wouldn't recommend using one of these small hobby bandsaws to cut out on such thick timber. I did this because the jigsaw was totally blunt by this stage, so the Titan did itself proud actually. I then used the offcuts to mark out the pattern on the opposite side, so everything should be nice and symmetrical. I then repeated the procedure on the opposite side and removed the curvature of the pattern on the bandsaw again. There was quite an extensive amount of sanding needed to be done to refine the pattern, so I used the belt sander to remove the most of the material and then did lots and lots of hand sanding. I then drew out the heart on the top of the headrest, and then this could be then cut out with a jigsaw. So first I pilot holed several holes into the heart, and then again used the jigsaw, this smoking jigsaw, to cut out the rest of the pattern. After the heart was cut out, I then refined the shape of the heart with a selection of hand rasps and files. I then printed out a picture of a Highland cow, which the lady had chose for the design, on her chair, ready to be routed out. I then used some acrylic writing in the form of stencils to write the lady's name down the centre of the backrest, again to be routed out. For the outline of the pattern, I used a V-groove bit in the palm router, and then I used a straight cut bit to remove the larger portions of the design. I then used some 80 grit sandpaper to remove the paper and the glue from the design. Next, I put a round over bit into the router, and I put a round over on all the edges on both the backrest and the seat. I then give everything a final sanding with 80 grit sandpaper. I don't want to go down to 120 or 240 with this design, because it's going to have a burnt rustic effect around the edges, just to give it a sense of aged, and also the brie wax applies better when you've got more grip to the pine rather than when it's totally smooth with 240 grit sandpaper. So as you can see here, I'm putting a burn on all the edges and on the design, and this adds a sense of age to the timber. I then sand off in areas where it's too dark and I want to lighten it up a bit, and then I can start to apply the briar wax. On this application I'm using a dark oak briar wax, and it brings out the grain really nicely, and the textures of the timber and the burnt areas stand out really well. After applying the briar wax, you leave it on for approximately 10 minutes, and then I get out my homemade buffing instrument and I give everything a really good buff, and it brings out a lovely shine, as you can see on this final piece. We're at that stage of the build then, guys, where I normally say is there anything I do differently, and if I was going to build these chairs more regular, I think I'd use a piece of 609mm MDF to use as a template for the designs, and this would make cutting them out a lot easier. Also, I would use a longer jigsaw blade if I was using this thick material, as the one I had was a bit short and it was also a bit dull. I would also use some thinner timber next time, as this was really thick. But apart from that, I'm really happy how the design went and the build in general, and I hope the lady has lots of pleasant evenings staring up at the stars with a glass of wine, relaxing, enjoying her evenings. I'll catch you next week, guys. Bye.